Hey, what's up? Dean, Sear Performance. We're back on the shop and working on Jeff's S10 today. Started working on it yesterday and I got the whole factory harness that was left in there from when it was probably either a 4-cylinder or a V6, probably a 4-cylinder. So I got that all pulled out yesterday. This morning I came in and pulled the fender off to access. There's a plug that goes through. It's two halves of this and it screws in, and it's not like a bulkhead where like one half meets the other and they screw together and you can take them apart. It's not like that. It's actually like all the wires just pass straight through, and then they're glued in with this almost like a, I don't know, like a polyurethane or something like that. And then these two halves, there's two halves, there's one down there and one here. They just kind of squish over it and you can see all the glue in it, and that's what seals this in the fenders. Half of this sticks through, so only that little bit sticks out, and then that glue seals it, and then it's got this rubber seal, the flange seal, that sits right here and up against the fender where you can see it's really clean. So the way I like to do it is you disconnect the ECU and you pull all the plugs out. Now obviously you still got some that like these are your speed sensors, and you got a couple other for like cruise control and stuff like that, which won't work on this truck. The speed sensor, I believe I can make it work. It's going to a pulse generator inside. One of these plugs goes to, there's a little white box. It's like a pulse generator that the ECU sends a signal, or the VSS on the side of the transmission, the speed sensor sends a signal into that box, and then it converts it to what I believe is 4,000 pulses. It's kind of what I remember. I could be wrong, might be wrong. But being that that's still in there, I'm over here picking glue. But yeah, so the harness, now these are your ECU plugs. So you've only got these wires here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 wires off the ECU that go inside the truck. And obviously, like this orange is most likely your battery. Then you'll have coolant, you know, whatever else with your speed or cruise control stuff. Yeah, there'll be a few different things that come out. You can find all the pinouts online. The plugs are labeled on the back side. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, kind of. These ones are not, though. Yeah, F1. You can see it right there. F1. And F16. So you've got pin 1 to pin 16, and that should be 17. Or no, I have that backwards. I'm sorry. E1 on the top. So you got F1 on the bottom over to F16, and then you've got, man, focus, E1, and that's probably gonna say E16. It's kind of rubbed off on that side, but looks like it says E16. And then on this should be the same other than the lettering. Yeah, so you've got B1 to B16. Oh, I left a clip on the top, but I think the top is A. But you can get these pinouts online find out exactly what pins they are. Like for example, like this orange with a black. See, it continues into the truck. So where does it go? What does it do? That is gonna be a F. 1, 2, 3, 4. Man, these are so hard to count. Go backwards. 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9. F9. So you look in your pinout, F9, you know, and so on and so forth. You got F11, and then there'll be F12 are 2 browns. F11 and F12 are 2 browns. So you just go through and you find out which one is. I like to label them individually, you know exactly what they are, and you just kind of leave them on there. And then, you know, if it's something that you're not needing, kind of trace it back, follow it back. There's always plugs usually. So like right there, you can kind of see there's 2 plugs right there. So instead of clipping the wire, say clipping the wire here, you know, and taping it in, you can pull the plugs apart, de-pin the wire. Always keep the wire because it may be something you can use later on if you add something back in. You could always stick it back into the plug. Or if not, you just leave it out, and then you don't have wires wrapped up and making, I call it pregnancy lumps in your electrical system. So, but it's a tedious task. It does take time and a little bit of patience. But I feel like it's the right way to do it. And then you don't get just a massive pile of wires and everything. You know, at the end of the day, you go from having all that bundled up to having something, you know, rather small, like this section here. You know, and this section here you can route back. You know, it's smaller and tighter, it'll be neater. And you don't necessarily have to have looped across the front of the motor like it was. You know, you can find different ways to hide it. If you need to extend one of the plugs for like the AC or something like that, you know, it makes it a lot easier to do. But I'm gonna keep working on this, and then I'll come right back on and kind of give another update of how I label them. And then, you know, with everything removed, you'll be able to see like kind of how the harness looks before and after. I mean, this is how it looks before. Obviously, you know how it looks when it's strung over your motor. This side of it is a little bit of a mess. This is kind of where they did untape and tie in and add in and do things more or less the wrong way, which brought us to this point. And then, you know, it's all plugs. This giant plug goes up over there, on the far side right there, and plugs in. Obviously it's got like the starter, an enormous power, ignition power. It's got grounds, you know, it's got all kinds of stuff. So not necessarily grounds for outside, but it could be grounds for the interior. You know, and then these are the relays that are mounted up on the firewall up there, which always can be moved. You got alternator, which we're not going to use this anymore either. It's 2 wire, so one will be field and one will be signal, like the generator signal, I believe, for the ECM to turn the alternator on. So I'll have to find that, and I believe the way I remember doing it is like a resistor. You have to put like a resistor, or the light on the dashboard acts as a resistor to power the alternator without like blowing it apart. But I sometimes like to try and just have the alternator wired to the battery and see if it charges. Like a DR44 alternator will charge around 13.5 to 13.8 volts, just with disconnecting the 2 wires off the top. So kind of becomes a one wire hookup, because that alternator has like a computer built into the back, and it'll default. I don't believe this one can do that. I don't believe it has the capability to just go to a default charge, but it's worth a shot. And then we have another. This was a second wire that had been added to the back of the alternator and kind of run across over to the battery. And I'm assuming they were trying to charge, and it's speaker cable. This is an audio cable. It's not what you use for automotive. The strands are very, very small. There's I don't know all the technicality to it, but that's not how you do it. Especially when you already have inside the loom your giant alternator wire that runs all the way through, and I believe this is the back of the alternator. Pretty sure this should have gone from the starter. The big red one should have come from the starter. And that's where your battery cable goes, so that's where your alternator will charge to. Some cars are a little bit different. They will go directly to battery, but I'm not sure why they did that. But yeah, we'll make it right. But I'll come back. I'll get this pile of crap all sorted out and come back. Okay, so I got everything sorted out. Here's the two red and blue ECU connectors, and what I do is I don't just cut the wires off. So like all the wires that like go to the engine, you just leave them, because then that way there, you know, you're not needing to sort any of those because they're really, really long. And then whatever wires are connected to the interior, to the engine bay or something, grab one wire, find out what pin it is first. This way, if you just go through and cut the wires, you can mix up and easily get confused. So you leave them connected. You take one by one. You see there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 wires on this plug that you need to figure out. And I mean, that's not really that hard. There's plenty of diagrams online available. There's a ton of them everywhere. So it's not that hard to figure out. So you just take it and you figure out, you know, that's F1 E16. So you look it up, you find out what it is, and then I believe that's this one here. Okay, yeah, E16. So I use like masking tape, just regular like blue painter's masking tape, and I write E16 battery feed. And what I do is I write it on the roll. So you need a roll of masking tape, a Sharpie, you write it on there, then you peel it off, stick it to the wire, and cut it. And then you kind of untangle it. Like I didn't quite get this one all the way untangled, but it's obvious that's where it goes. But try and untangle them and then fold them off the plug is the way I do it. You see, and then it kind of makes it a little bit easier, rather than like if it comes in this side and say these two browns are on opposite sides, if it looks like it's over there, you might get confused, you know, with picking this pin. So I take them, pull them through the strands, and then fold them down, you know, cut them, they're labeled, and then you know. Then the red one, same thing, folded them down. In this one there was 1, 2, 3, 4 wires total, which one of them literally looped back to the blue connector. I know it was white, it's right here, this white one here, it just looped over into the blue connector from the red connector. So you just kind of clip that one because you know it's just the signal getting sent to each other. But they're all labeled out. I got VSS high signal is purple with white, and the VSS low ref signal is light green with black. They're both twisted together from the factory because it's like a shielding that they do. They twist them together. So I just put one piece of tape, both sides. You can see what it is. Every single wire is labeled with the pins. This one doesn't go to the ECU, but these do. So E13, F12, F6, fuel pump relay control, you know, even this check engine light, E6. So I can take this and run it to one of the sniper outputs, and if ever it had an issue, his check engine light is gonna work just like it's always, you know, worked from the factory. You know, and then the speed buffers from the ECM to that little buffer box. Cruise control, you know, he doesn't need that. Can't have it, actually. You know, DLC connector, you can't really have that. Serial data, he's not going to use that. So those, you know, immediately those 2 or 3 wires, whatever they are, even like brake switch. So on this truck, we're removing the stock ECM to control the 4L60. So we're going to use a MSD trans controller. So you'll need this brake switch to send the signal to the MSD box to say to unlock the clutch, torque converter clutch. So now that's right there. I know where it goes. You know, it's pretty simple. And then these were the ones. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. These ones here, 5. Sorry, there's 5 in total. Were straight already out in the engine bay. So you have sorry, AC request comes off of E12. Sensor ground, which most likely won't get used, so I'll trace that one all the way back up, take it out. Fuel pump signal, you've got your ECM battery feed, which, you know, this is the wire that you should use for your sniper. This is your battery side of your sniper. So instead they left it to the stock ECM controlling the transmission. You know, it's just simple little things like that, and it makes it a lot nicer, along with the fact that, you know, and this is the VSS, your speed sensor. This is the plug for it, so I'll keep the plug because I'm going to need that for the MSD box. I did have to actually cut that one because it was like crazy strung through all kinds of fuel lines and stuff. But I didn't touch this side yet. So now that I've got that side sorted and labeled, I'm going to go inside the truck, take out the pins that I don't need off those 2 plugs, which will only be, you know, 2 or 3 wires, like I said. I'm going to pull those pins out and then come back out here. The wires that I do need, I'll keep. The wires I don't need, I'll follow through. Same thing, I'll pull them out, disconnect them. And a lot of times with like the grounds and stuff, like you can see this one, no, that goes to a different plug, but like there's so many grounds that are stuck in together, and there's a lot of times where you don't need them. These are all the relay grounds, so that you do need. Then you have the ground that comes over here and it grounds through that big plug there. So you have to be careful not to cut grounds where you need them, cut them where you don't need them. And what I like to do is I take all the tape off where they crimp them together, and then if I don't need one, you can get it cut That's not one I did. I haven't cut any of these, but somebody along the line kind of no. Yeah, no. I did cut this one, right there. So you cut it as close to the connector as you can. Um, they are like soldered in there, on these connectors. Sometimes it doesn't look like this one is, but and then you kind of just push it back down, and then you can get it taped back up neatly. They're ground, so it's not, that's how they were from the factory. They stick this all together, they crimp it, and then they tape it, because there's just so many that go together. It'd be hard to do, like, any kind of other connection in reality here, but it's not gonna hurt if one touches something. It's not gonna short out. Excuse me, yawning, tired. So it's not super. You just make it look neat, and you put it in the loom. And the other half of what I like to do with these is, when you put it in here, they fold them over so many different times. But when you put it in the loom, alone aside from having this taped up real good, when you stick it in with the bundle, tape the bundle around that again, and it just keeps it a little bit neater. And you don't have to use half a roll of tape, and give it a big huge lump. But these are wires here. This is a pile of wires that literally, they were just left in there. This is the old oil pressure sensor, which is in the back of the motor, but this was left unplugged for whatever reason. Then you have, this weird plug here. Not sure what that went to. It could have been like an EGR or something like that at some point, but had pretty heavy gauge wire. And this is actually what they were using to power the Holley Sniper. Then you come down and they butt connected it here, and then from the factory you got some tape over it, so there's something going on there from the factory. Probably it might be like a resistor or something in there, or it just could be a pile of tape that was on the wire. But all these things were just kind of left laying in the engine bay. This is only a piece of what's left from the coolant sensor wire, and this is what kind of cracks me up. So you've got, this is what the factory wire was here. That tiny little green dot right there, and somebody along the line feels like they soldered it, which is good, and then heat shrinked it too, with the good like adhesive heat shrink. You can kind of see it squished out there, so that's good. They went to a black wire, it's fine, whatever. But then we butt connected it to a green wire. It's only, a foot long, maybe 14 inches long, and then we butt connected it again to another green wire, which is here. There's on this side, maybe here. So it was butt connected to here, and it was just strung up, a mile long. The oil pressure wire, which is this one here, this black one, goes down to a oil pressure sensor, and it literally, all of this to this butt connector was wrapped up in here, then connected to, this is all the heat shrink tube for it. That's all the heat shrink tube, and you can see it's completely melted away. But it connected to one of the wires here somewhere. Had it, oil pressure, it's on one of these wires, but it was just massive long, which is ridiculous. Oh, see, here's coolant temp. So that green wire runs through and went to here. And now you can see this is that big plug that sits up right above it. You know, sat up right there, right above it. So here you've got almost 2 feet of wire. Now, mind you, I put a zip tie here and I put a zip tie there just to kind of hold this bundle together. There's the oil pressure wire right there. So same thing. It's just as long, but yet you needed another, you know, 2 feet of wire would have gone from here, would have gone down to the sensor. Like maybe not in the perfect way, but that's long enough to go down. So maybe it needed to be, you know, 6-8 inches longer, but it doesn't need to be, you know, 10 feet long. Me personally, if you have, you can kind of see it. Turn the light on. There it is. You can kind of see the sensor. Oops, right there. You can see the black to the silver going into the brass 90. Which most likely they used because of the different style intake. Or the sensor ran up into the bottom of the distributor, whichever. But why not have turned that brass fitting to this side, take whatever sensor is down there, put it in that brass sensor, and now you have enough wire to go from this plug straight to that sensor, and you have just a short strand of wire. You know, the same with the coolant sensor. So it's in the cylinder head, you know, like most small block Chevys are. So you have to come out, which they run fairly close to the header. It's you know, a finger and a half width away from the header. But now you have to come out and try and make something look neat, you know, over here with one wire, which is all fine and good. You know, you can go down to the frame and come up, whatever. But, I mean, you have a port right here. You've got your Holley sensor here. You know, if for the factory dash, that's what that sensor was for. Why not have it here? And then you can kind of compare, you know, what's the Holley showing you? Is it showing you 160 degrees, but your dashboard is showing you, you know, 220 or something? You know, just something. You know, it gives you a good comparison. I used to do a lot of Phytex, and straight out of the box, you basically take that sensor right there and throw it in the garbage, because 99% of them were bad straight out of the box. I think today they're still having that same issue. We don't use that system. We won't use that system. We won't even install those systems. They're completely inferior compared to the Holley product. But again, why not have it here, you know, and then you know you already have your coolant wire for your Sniper, so you can take that one wire right there and kind of loop it over a little bit. Now, mind you, there's some extra wires here that I pulled from the Holley, so we'll pull those aside. We'll pull the spark plug wires aside. So this is what you would have as a look. That's got to go. It's going to get plugged, because I don't like looking at a sensor that's not being used. And that hole's not big enough, and you don't want a sensor on top of your thermostat. But that one will go in there, loop the wire around in some nice loom, you know, zip tie it to here, go under, follow this wire, you know, go under the intake, come up the back, and right to it. And again, you probably have almost enough wire from right here to do that. You know, it ends right there. So you probably have almost enough wire to do that. Maybe not enough, add on a little bit, but I don't know the need to, you know, do a butt connector. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the need for all that. But we're working on it. We're gonna make it right. These are the things that frustrate me, so I figured I'd take it out on you and make you listen. But we'll get it sorted. I do know I'm gonna have to convert the switches on the AC I already know that, just like I did on the Caprice, which is, it's a fairly, again, a very simple thing to do, and it kind of makes it an old school sort of way the system works. And I may not actually have to do that. So the way some of these work, usually they're 3-pin. 3-pin is a resistor or a transducer. So it sends like a 5-volt signal, then it has a ground, then it has a signal output. So where is it? So even that is a 2-pin. Whereas, say, the oil pressure sensor, that's a perfect example. Oil pressure sensor has 3 wires. There's an orange, a gray, and sort of a tan or a white. So one will be a 5-volt reference, which a lot of times is the gray. One will be a signal out, and one will be a ground. And that'll show, you know, a 0 to 5 volts will be like hypothetical, like 0 to 100 psi or 0 to 200 psi, however the switch is configured, and that'll send that signal back to the ECU, just like a fuel pressure sensor, you know, for the Holley kits, or, you know, so on and so forth. But with AC, they call it like a binary switch, where it's normally open or normally closed. So what you want on the low side, which would be here at the accumulator, you want to normally open, so that if the freon is low, it will not complete the circuit through the switch. Then once it gets to, I think it's roughly 25 psi or somewhere around there, this switch will close. It'll close the circuit. So now the system knows, okay, there's X amount of freon in there creating X amount of pressure, so it'll close the circuit. Then you would come to your high pressure switch, which is on the back of this AC pump, but normally they're in your high pressure line, which is the smaller. It's your discharge, so you could say suction, discharge, whatever, high pressure, low pressure. So it would normally be in this line. On most cars, it would be in this line. And again, that one is a, you could do it one of two ways. You could do like the binary, where it's open, normally open, and then it'll close at a very low pressure, like a 50 psi, and then it'll reopen at a really high pressure, like a 350 psi. Or you could just do where it's normally closed and it opens at 350 psi, and that's what'll cycle your AC, keep it from over pressurizing or running without freon in the system. We've had a few cars come in where they literally took the AC clutch and wired it directly to the heater box switch, like directly to it, with no fuse, no relay, no nothing. The way we do it is we always trigger a relay to send the signal to the clutch. Whether it needs it or not, I don't care. You can argue it. It doesn't matter to me. I always trigger the AC clutch with a relay, and the relay is always fed with a fuse. Just like I did on the Caprice, it runs through the fuse. Fuse runs through the switches, back to the relay, out to the compressor. It's simple. It's not hard. It might be tedious or whatever, but yeah, so we're working on it. So like I said, what I'm going to do next is get in there, take out what I don't need, tape everything up, and then to reseal the goopy globby pile of stuff. I haven't decided on which I'm going to use yet, like a seam sealer, or if I'm going to find kind of another like wax type of product, the same as kind of what's in there. But regardless, I'll make sure I get it sealed up good and get it back in. So on this video for now, that's going to be it. I'm going to start try and make a little bit shorter videos. I mean, this one's 23 minutes. You can't really say it's short, can you? But yeah, Jeff, we are working on your truck. Oh, by the way, also we got the ABS unit out. He's deleting the ABS, going with a line lock, which is up there. So the ABS is out, and now we just need to do the proportioning valve and tie all the lines back in correctly, and kind of tidy them up where they kind of are a little bit close to the header here. You know, we'll get rid of that. Oh, that one's way over there. There it is. So got 3 lines here. So 2 front, 1 rear. So the 2 front will come off the proportioning valve. The master cylinder front, which is backwards, it's always funny. The front will go to the line lock. Out of the line lock will go to the proportioning valve. Proportioning valve will have both front feeds. So that'll be a task to get these bent neatly and hooked up. But we'll get it, no big deal. Finish sorting out all the wires and fuel lines. Gonna change the fuel lines too. Yeah, I know I'm making this really long now, but I don't like this rubber hose, and it's hard. It's rubbery but hard, not like a dry rotted hard, but you can see how it's swelled and cracking because it was either over tightened or it's just old. But I don't know that this is the right hose. The one good thing is they did use the DEI heat sleeve, but I don't like this hose. I don't like these push lock fittings, even though it's a clamp on it. I just have no faith in a rubber hose holding up. I know fuel line goes bad, but you know, me personally, I'd rather have a good PTFE style braided line that the fittings are locked together. I know they're good. So yeah, that'll be another thing, routing some fuel lines, and I'll probably route them different than the way the factory comes up and on the transmission. I might take them along the, man, I'm not showing you anything, am I? I might take them along the firewall, over the brake booster, and down along the inner fender to the outside of the frame, which you can kind of see right there, and kind of run them down the outside of the frame, or come in and go down. I just don't want them near the heat. I know they'll still get hot, but you don't want them to get too hot and melt. So I'm going through wiring everything up on Jeff's S10, and the starter solenoid wire, which comes off that big plug, this purple one here, that it ran all the way across. I mean, it went down below, back behind, and then came over. It came up, over, and then it wrapped like over the AC line, and then it came down and went all the way back and under. And then, so what I found was, I'm trying to shorten everything up, and what I did over here with those wires that come through, I left them a little bit longer than what they needed to be, but I took them from right there where the plug for the heater box comes off and the 3 relays. That's where all the wires coming. No, that's where all the wires coming out of the truck. That's where they kind of split apart, so everything fits good right there. And then the AC switch comes off that also, which I'm gonna re-loom all this stuff. But I took it from there and I loomed it, and I actually cut probably about 1.5 feet of wire out, because it used to come all the way out, up and back. So I cut about 1.5 feet of wire out, used real good barrel crimps, Bear barrel crimps, and then use the good adhesive heat shrink tubing. Like I said, I left it a little bit long, and I shoved a little extra into the truck so I could always, you know, pull it back out, or, you know, pull it back in, whichever way you need to go with it. But I'll end up most likely putting a P-clamp on this bottom bolt for the heater box. Comes through on this side down right there. I'll probably end up using like a P-clamp on that to hold the loom in place, or a P-clamp here on this one, or 2 P-clamps, I don't really know, to hold it in place. And then I tucked it up under the cowl, on top of the heater box, so that it's kind of, you know, hidden. It's tucked back nice and neat. Oh, you can't see it. It's tucked back in there nice and neat. That one's really tight to get in there, but it's not pinching the wires. They move freely and stuff. It was just hard to get in because that little tab right there, and then it comes across and it's taped up good. So this loom, I decided I'm not going to put everything in one big loom. All the EFI harness, I'm not going to put it all in one loom. This way, if there is any issues, that harness is a separate harness, and you don't have an issue of going through all these extra wires in here, figuring out which one's which, and tearing this whole thing apart and having to redo the whole thing. If it's just the EFI harness, there should only be, you know, a few wires that come off of it that you need to kind of go through. You got a pink ignition switch, you've got red battery voltage, then you got direct to battery, positive and negative, and I think this is another switched ignition for the Hyperspark box, and then you got all your inputs and outputs and your fuel pump, obviously. So it'll be a minimal search, if that's what you want to say, and there really shouldn't be an issue, but you never know. Just in case there is, then this way here it's a little bit easier. I haven't started stringing that yet. I'm going to do that last when I decide on where I'm mounting the coil and the CDI box. I took this off the AC box, the Hyperspark box, which was tucked up under the dashboard and kind of fell out with the stock ECU. So all of that is gone. I also depinned this plug, like I had said. There was 2 right in the center. You can see they're missing now. They're somewhere. Oh, they're in the box now. But so I depinned this whole harness. This used to go, man, let me put that down. This used to go out there as well. It used to go through there as well. So, you know, this is that many less wires that have to go out and in that loom and across the engine bay and try and hide or whatever. This is the buffer, speed buffer, like your speedometer. They call it like a buffer box. I 99% positive that I won't need this box, because the MSD will, I believe the MSD has a speed output, so we can wire direct to the speedometer, and I'm pretty sure that's off this box, because as you can see, the purple and green that are twisted from here are in this harness as well, so they go into the box. And if memory serves correct, it's been a long time since I've done one of these. I believe it's this white one that runs over to the factory speedometer on the dash. So this would literally be the only wire we would need, because this box changes the signal from the ECU, or it converts the signal from the speed sensor, and outputs it to like the 4,000 pulses, I believe. I'm not 100% sure. Also, with taking all the Holley harness out and the Hyperspark, which is Holley, that leaves that big gaping hole right there that they had, you know, 3 little wires running through. So I'm gonna take that off, make a little panel to weld back in. The other half of it that the wires were actually rubbing on is part of the inner fender. So right there. So I'm gonna make the patch panel to go in here, probably from the inside, and I'll weld it in. This one, I'm not gonna worry so much about this hole because it's an inner fender. So it's you know, it's not really gonna hurt anything. But I also found these are your transmission lines, these 2 right here, and they come down, and I'm gonna try my best to get this camera in there. And that one there, you can see, is running right next to the exhaust. I mean, with just a bump, it's laying on it. So, you know, again, same with the back side. That one is actually on it, on the inside of the exhaust. I can't really get in there. You can almost see it, but it is actually laying up against the exhaust where it comes by the bell housing, and they had to kind of turn the pipe. You can see right there, they had to turn the pipe away from the frame rail. So that all needs to be addressed. And I don't know what kind of line this is. It doesn't look like the end swivel, so I'm not even sure. I haven't tried taking it off yet. I haven't gotten to that point. But back to the starter solenoid, what I'm gonna do is take it from right there where I cut it. Now I'm gonna run it along the top of the bell housing and then come down the side to the top of the starter to get it away from the header, because again, running along there and where it had kind of looped up and over to the starter was almost touching the header. But being that I did that, I don't get it. The factory wire is probably 10 gauge, 8 gauge, and then somewhere along the years somebody has come along and to lengthen it 8 inches, which the wires, see, if I hold it up, the wire's over 6 foot tall. It's taller than me. I'm 5'6", and the wire's over 6 foot tall. Comes all the way up above my head, so it's roughly 6 foot tall. To lengthen it a few inches, they crimped it on to, like, this is probably 14 gauge. It's like a 14 gauge wire, which is not, to me, that's not a big enough wire. It even almost looks like it was kind of starting to get heated up inside that heat shrink tubing. And then on the end, come on, they crimp a terminal on, and you can see the corrosion, that greenish kind of color, and it'll, you son of a bitch, it'll sink down through the connector, and that'll give you a bad connection. So it's always good to do the terminal. You know, you can get them with the heat shrink tubing already on them, or do the bare terminal, put the heat shrink tubing over it, you know, all the way up to the loop, so that it seals that opening right there. No moisture, nothing can get in there. You know, that's the best way to do it. He did leave some heat sleeve. I believe this is heat sleeve. Yeah, I believe that's heat sleeve. So I'm gonna put this whole wire, I'm gonna do the ring terminal, put the heat sleeve on, and get it, you know, put heat shrink on the terminal end of the wire and run it down how I want to run it, and then I'll have it up in the engine compartment, you know, to be something, you know, something along the lines, you know, like this, you know, and then I'll have a bunch of extra wire hanging out, so I can just cut it right here, crimp it, heat sleeve it, and then get it back wrapped into the new loom that I'll run. And I pulled out this giant pink ignition wire that I need to trace back to where it goes. This is the oil pressure wire, which again, I did find that they had that wire hooked up to this plug, which, if anybody is familiar with any small block Chevy LT1 style or newer all the way up to an LS, you'll kind of recognize this plug. It's not an oil pressure sensor plug. It actually went to that. Come on. That right there in the side of the block, which that is a knock sensor. That is not an oil pressure sensor. So there's no way that even read oil pressure. It's a knock sensor. It's to determine knock. But this is definitely the oil pressure wire. That was in the schematics. So, and that's most likely why it's light at the plug. And then they again crimped it on here to a black wire that goes all the way to another butt connector that was on that tan wire right there. So this was actually, no, that's another piece of black wire. I'm wrong. That was another thing. This was, I think I threw it away already. That was another piece of black wire that made it even longer. Then it went to the tan wire. So there's literally 3 butt connectors to get down to that sensor. So all that's garbage. But yeah, that's kind of a quick update along with in between doing everything. And I'll keep updating as I get further and further along. So I also changed the booster. I put a 7-inch booster. I had it laying around, and then kind of the old school master cylinder. His master cylinder is there, and it's like the bore of the master cylinder. The casing is too big to fit inside of this one, so I had that master cylinder. I put that. I got the new proportioning valve that has dual front out and the single out rear. So, but again, he's getting line lock, so this port here will come from the outside of the line lock. This port here on the master cylinder will go to the inside of the line lock. This one will get changed. This fitting will get changed and reflared to go onto the front port here. And then this line, yeah, this line here, this fitting will get changed and it'll go on the bottom. On the bottom under here, right there in that bottom port. You can barely see it. There it is. That bottom port there is the other front tire. And then you have the single back that I'll have to cut down and do all that good stuff with. Also pulled apart all the fan wiring. I don't know. So these are your fan feeds, right? Look how big this wire is, let alone how long it is. Just, it's a thick gauge wire, you know, again, like an 8 or a 10 gauge wire. Then you had your battery feeds, nice thick wire. They crimped in fuses. You don't need these on your battery feed to a relay. Then you had your 12-volt switched are these orange ones, which are, you know, it's a fine size for it, but they ring terminaled it and put it onto the battery junction box. So now you're literally feeding the relay 12 volts all the time, non-stop. And these are what get to a 12 volt switched source. I don't know. I don't know what to say, and it blows my mind. These are the Holley triggers for the fans, 2 of them that they tied into one, so both fans come on at the same time, which, you know, is okay. It's fine. I like to do one at one temp and one at one temp at a separate temperature, but I'm thinking what I'm going to do with this pink ignition wire is put in one of the Dorman, like, small fuse blocks that gives you 4 fuses, and that way I can run the fans to 2 of them, the fan relays to 2 circuits, and then have 2 circuits to feed the Sniper and the MSD box, and that way they're on their own fuse circuit. There's a couple of power wires I left intentionally in case I use those. Like I had said, this is the battery feed for the EFI, so I may use that. One of these is the 12 volt for the transmission. One of these is the 12 volt for the transmission plug. So I mean, I could use that for the MSD box, and then that's, you know, still on the factory transmission fuse. I also pulled out the handheld in the nice big hole they drilled. So I'll try and find some kind of rubber plug for that, but I pulled the handheld out. And I'm thinking what I'm gonna do is run that handheld wire through here and just kind of zip tie it along this harness, and then have it zip tied along this harness, and then have it come across to the connection for the throttle body over here, and that way it'll keep it tidy. But yeah, so I will keep getting at it, keep updating, and I'll see you soon. So yeah, so that's it for now. I'm losing my mind here, but Jeff's S10 getting worked on, so hopefully within the next couple weeks we'll have it wrapped up and melting the tires off the back. Thanks for watching. Do me a favor, hit the thumbs up for the like, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell to be notified, and leave me a comment. Appreciate it. Have a good day.